Okay, so we just, as I mentioned a moment ago, got the indictment from a source on Don Lemon. It is still under seal. It's interesting, though. They're talking about Don Lemon being a part of in a conspiracy, that he met with the other defendants and that they were planning. They met at a shopping center for a pre-op briefing. It gets into quite a bit of detail in here, and it uses a lot of information from Don Lemon's live stream on his YouTube channel from before they got to the church. They say that he was gearing up for a resistance he was with an organization that was gearing up for a resistance operation against the federal government's immigration policies, and that he took steps to maintain operational secrecy by reminding certain co-conspirators not to disclose the target of the operation. Let's bring in the host of The Beat and MS Now chief legal correspondent, Ari Melber. Ari, I know we got you the indictment. What stands out to you?
Well, this indictment, among other things, attempts to criminalize reporting, criminalize asking questions, criminalize what is widely understood as journalism, even though there's robust debate about exactly where those lines were, and your coverage earlier today was discussing that with some of your guests. So jumping right into it, on page 11, the Justice Department under Donald Trump is claiming that one of the overt acts in furtherance of a conspiracy or crime, so that this is an element of the crime, is that, quote, Don Lemon peppered the pastor with questions, quote unquote. I practice First Amendment law. As you know, we cover a lot of stories here, and I cover law here. I've never seen anything like this in the modern time. I mean, this is outrageous, baseless on the Lemon front. I'll mention that it is part of a wider indictment. So there are 9 defendants named here together, and some of them are redacted as mentioned, some of them are not. Lemon is one of them. So what they're doing is trying to take a wider case that is basically about storming this area where random citizens or people could have criminal or legal liability, and we've covered why. But they've added longtime journalists into this, and they're not hiding the ball, Katie. They're admitting that they want to criminalize asking questions. If you wanted this case to win in the long run in court in front of a jury, you might try to make a more narrow argument. They're not looking to make, from what I can tell, having just read this, legal, valid arguments that might win in the long run. The country can be on notice. Asking questions is one of the things that they say is a crime, Katie, or if I should say an element of a crime.
There's also this, and, you know, Lisa, you and I were talking about this earlier. Yeah. The law says you have to get, you got to obstruct physically the ability for people to get in or out. And in overt acts, according to this indictment on page 11, as Ari was reading from a little bit earlier in the page, it says at one point, Defendant Lemon posted himself at the main door of the church where he confronted some congregants and physically obstructed them as they tried to exit the church building to challenge them with, quote, facts about U.S. immigration policy. Do we have that part queued up? We played it a little earlier ago, and this was, I think, Lemon talking to not the pastor, but a gentleman asking him questions, and then he said the gentleman was talking about the last administration, saying the Biden administration didn't keep us safe, and that this administration was trying to keep us safe. And then Don Lemon says, well, I have some facts for you. So I think they're talking about that moment. We're going to get it queued up and we're going to play it. But Lisa, you saw it. Does that amount to what they're alleging here?
Well, there are some other allegations as well. I want to go back a few pages. If you look at one of the overt acts, Overt Act 15 on page 8, this is a broader allegation with respect to the sort of use of threats and intimidation that could be violative, or at least the federal government will say is violative, of one of the 2 statutes at issue here. They say, while inside the church, defendants Armstrong, Allen, Kelly, Lemon, Lundy, Crew, Fort, and the other 2. So all 9 of the defendants here oppressed, threatened, and intimidated the church's congregants and pastors by physically occupying most of the main aisle and rows of chairs. And so the suggestion—
near the front of the church.
Correct. The suggestion isn't just that Don Lemon made it difficult for people to leave the church, and I believe that the video evidence that you and I have talked about and you're referring to right now doesn't show Don Lemon obstructing somebody's exit. He's merely standing on the outside trying to ask some questions. The guy doesn't want to engage with him, and then he leaves. That, to me, is something less than the necessary intimidation intimidation or oppression or threat of force or using force that's necessary to sustain either of these charges, Katie.
Yeah, Ari, in the beginning of this indictment, I mean, it does read as if, what happened there was a real shock to your sensibilities, that it was really aggressive and it was really scary. They make a point of saying on page 2 that it was so scary that young children were left to wonder, as one child put it, if their parents were going to die.
Where to begin? I mean, we're covering an administration, as you and your guests have shown today, that is looking the other way when children and others are scared of the actual federal agents using deadly force against Americans, killing an unarmed mother of 3. There is a traditional deference in the legal system in courts for the government's argument. This administration is burning that up. And that's not my observation. That's what we're hearing on this very case. I just want to remind everyone, as we go through these claims, some of which don't appear on first read as very factual, that this effort to indict a journalist for this was rejected internally by the guardrails inside the DOJ, even with people willing to carry out Trump's agenda in general, and by judges. And we've touched on this in our coverage today, but I want to reiterate it. We're not looking at anything that started out in a normal, factual, legal way. As far back as January 22nd, a judge already rejected the low standard of probable cause to bring a case against the longtime journalist, now independent journalist, Mr. Lemon. The following day, the Trump forces tried to appeal that, find a different judge to see if they would override that. They're allowed to do that. They lost again. The appeals judge did not find that this met the fairly low standard of probable cause. To remind everyone, at the beginning, you only need probable cause. That's very low. Later, you need to prove it before a jury beyond a reasonable doubt. So starting at the lowest, easiest burden, they couldn't meet it. We also have reporting from MS Now journalists that there were people inside the DOJ that refused to bring this case. Again, they've supported everything Donald Trump's DOJ has been doing up to this couple weeks, but wouldn't bring this case. Why? Because it's not a matter of opinion, because they didn't think it met the legal standard and they have an oath. So that's the wider context. The other thing I would read here with regard to the overt acts is on page 8, they say that Lemon was involved in, and you alluded to a different passage that mentions this, quote, oppressing, threatening, intimidating the church, congress, and pastors, physically occupying most of the main aisles, rows, and chairs, etc. Anyone who's ever watched coverage of protests, which we've had on our air and other journalists doing that this month, or past demonstrations in the United States and elsewhere, knows that journalists move around in areas where other people may be trespassing, may be violating a curfew, etc. This is standard. So again, I always want to be fair about what we're looking at, but I also need to be honest. Nothing about this effort to bring in a journalist into an area where other citizens, people may have been trespassing or violating rules, passes the test.
So, Ari, if they're going after Don Lemon in this way, and if this is not an indictment that on first read is going to make it very far through the system, to do that and to do it to Don Lemon, who is one of the most recognizable faces and figures in this country, somebody who has had a very public and contentious relationship with Donald Trump now for 10 years. What is the intention behind this? What message are they trying to send?
Well, I think it's a great question, Katie, and I think when we actually look at what's happening here, this was admitted as coming from the top. We had the unusual presence of the Attorney General saying this was on her orders. That makes it harder to win the case in the long run, but she may have her own reasons for telegraphing that. We had Donald Trump also calling out and attacking Don Lemon. I want to be clear, the president, like everyone else, is free to express his views, and he can be very strong and critical of all journalists, all of us, all people. That's First Amendment. The First Amendment also protects the right of the press to report. So it goes both ways. What we are witnessing is an administration that wants free speech and free press for them, what they like, and not for everyone else. That's a bad sign. The amendment is first precisely because the founders were worried that autocrats and despots would try to do this. So the messaging to your question is maybe they want to make a point. Maybe they want to use legal harassment. Maybe, and I'm not reporting this as fact, but this is a question we would put to the administration. They can speak to it. Maybe they are trying to pick on individuals who aren't a part of large corporations right now and don't have a standing, funded legal defense long term. Those are the type of things that you look at legally when you say, oh, they didn't go at someone who's currently at a large outlet. They went at someone who is noticeably prominent on their potential enemies list, quote unquote, but independent.